The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the rainy night. Officer Brando Holloway grinned, thinking he'd just caught a career criminal driving a stolen luxury car. He thought he was looking at a thug. He thought he was looking at a promotion. But what Officer Holloway didn't know, as he shoved the suspect into the back of his cruiser, was that the man in the back seat wasn't a thief. He was the Honorable Justice Julian Thorne of the State Supreme Court. And Officer Holloway had just made the last mistake of his career. This isn't just a story about a traffic stop. It's a story about the brutal, crushing weight of karma when the law strikes back. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. Sometimes it just makes the grime stick harder. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The streets of the minimalist, high-end district of Bellevue were slick with oil and water, reflecting the red and blue strobe lights of a patrol cruiser. Officer Brando Holloway sat in his Ford Explorer, chewing on a toothpick, his eyes narrowed. He was a 6-year veteran of the force, a man who prided himself on his instincts. To his colleagues, Holloway was a results guy. To the community, he was a bully with a badge. He had 3 excessive force complaints in his file, all swept under the rug by the police union rep, Mike O'Connell. Holloway felt untouchable. Ahead of him sat a masterpiece of engineering, a 1967 Jaguar E-Type, British racing green, convertible top up against the rain. It was a $50,000 car on a bad day, $250,000 on a good one. Holloway ran the plates. They came back to a generic LLC, Veritas Holdings. No immediate flags. But Holloway didn't care about flags. He cared about what he saw through the rain-streaked windshield. He saw a silhouette, a black man, driving a car that cost more than Holloway would make in 5 years. "Gotta be stolen," Holloway muttered to his dashcam, though he hadn't turned the audio on yet. Or drugs. Definitely drugs. He hit the siren, a quick whoop-whoop, and stepped out into the drizzle, hand on his holster, shoulders squared. He walked with the swagger of a man who owned the pavement. Inside the Jaguar, the driver remained perfectly still. He was an older man, perhaps in his early 60s, wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that fit his frame with military precision. His hair was graying at the temples, cut close. He had the hands of a pianist or a surgeon, steady, resting at 10 and 2 on the wooden steering wheel. He watched the officer approach in the side mirror. He didn't panic. He didn't flinch. He lowered the window exactly 4 inches. "License and registration," Holloway barked, not bothering with a "good evening." He shone his tactical flashlight directly into the driver's eyes, trying to blind him, trying to provoke a reaction. The driver blinked once, his face impassive. "Officer, is there a reason for this stop?" "I was traveling 35 in a 35 zone. My taillights are functional." The voice was a deep baritone, articulate and calm. It was the voice of a man used to silence falling when he spoke. "I didn't ask for a speech, pal," Holloway sneered, leaning closer, letting the rain drip from his brim into the car. "I asked for your papers, and I smell marijuana." It was a lie, a blatant, lazy lie. The interior of the Jaguar smelled of rich mahogany leather and faint, expensive cologne. Santal 33. "There is no marijuana in this vehicle," the driver said. "I am going to reach into my inner jacket pocket to retrieve my wallet. I am telling you this so you do not mistake the motion for aggression." "Get out of the car!" Holloway shouted, escalating instantly. He ripped the door open. "Out, now!" "Officer, I am complying with—" Holloway didn't wait. He grabbed the lapel of the $3,000 suit and yanked. The driver, caught off guard by the sheer breach of protocol, stumbled out onto the wet asphalt. "Hands on the hood! Spread 'em!" Holloway kicked the man's ankles apart, harder than necessary. He slammed the man's chest against the cold, wet metal of the Jaguar's hood. The driver winced but didn't cry out. "You are making a mistake," the driver said, his voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, like saying gravity exists. "Check my ID, officer. Look at the name." "Shut up," Halloway hissed, cuffing the man's hands behind his back. He tightened the ratchets until they bit into the skin. "You talk too much for a car thief." "I own this vehicle. My name is Julian Thorne." "Yeah, and I'm the King of England." Halloway laughed. He patted Thorne down, roughly checking pockets. He found the wallet. He pulled it out, but he didn't look at the ID inside. He just wanted to find the drugs he was sure were there. Finding none, he tossed the wallet onto the passenger seat of the Jaguar, open but unread. "You're going downtown, Julian," Halloway mocked him. "Resisting arrest, suspicion of grand theft auto. Maybe I'll add assaulting an officer if you keep looking at me like that." Halloway dragged him to the cruiser and shoved him into the back cage. The plastic seat was hard and smelled of old vomit and disinfectant. Julian Thorne sat upright in the back of the cruiser. He didn't scream. He didn't bang on the glass. He closed his eyes and began to memorize. Badge number 4922. Name tag, Halloway. Time, 11:52 p.m. Location, corner of 4th and Bellevue Way. He wasn't praying. He was building a case file in his mind. Halloway got in the front seat, adrenaline pumping. He radioed dispatch. "One male in custody, 10:15. Tow the Vic. It's a Jag." As they drove toward the precinct, Halloway glanced in the rearview mirror. The man in the back was staring right at him. The eyes were terrifying. They were devoid of fear. They held the cold, absolute judgment of a gavel striking a sounding block. For a split second, Officer Halloway felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. But he shook it off. It was just another collar. Just another thug in a suit. He had no idea that he had just arrested the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. The holding cell at the 4th Precinct was a concrete box designed to strip a man of his dignity. It was cold, loud, and smelled of despair. Officer Halloway had booked Thorne as John Doe because Thorne had exercised his right to remain silent during the booking process. Halloway had mocked him the whole time. "Cat got your tongue now? Big man in the fancy car has nothing to say?" Thorne had simply stood there, fingerprint ink staining his thumb, looking through Halloway as if the officer were made of glass. Thorne knew that anything he said would be twisted. He needed the forum where he held the power. He needed the courtroom. He spent the night sitting on the metal bench, his suit jacket folded neatly beside him, ignoring the drunken shouts of a man arrested for disorderly conduct in the next cell. Thorne meditated. He thought about the 4th Amendment. He thought about Terry v. Ohio. He thought about the concept of qualified immunity and exactly how he was going to dismantle it in Halloway's case. Morning came with the squeak of a metal door. "Doe, you're up for arraignment. Let's go." A different officer, a young rookie named Evans, called out. Evans looked at Thorne and paused. He saw the suit, wrinkled now but clearly expensive. He saw the posture. Evans frowned. This didn't look like the usual Tuesday night drunk tank resident. They walked him through the tunnels connecting the precinct to the municipal courthouse. The air changed. It became stale, recycled, the smell of bureaucracy. They entered courtroom 4B. It was the cattle call arraignment session. Dozens of defendants, overworked public defenders, and a bored judge trying to get through the docket before lunch. The public defender assigned to Thorne was a young woman named Sophia Jenkins. She looked exhausted. She grabbed the file Halloway had prepared. "Okay, Mr. Doe," she whispered hurriedly, not looking up. "They have you on resisting, obstruction, and suspicion of GTA. The car is registered to a holding company. They haven't been able to verify you're the owner yet, because you wouldn't talk. Look, if you plead no contest to the obstruction, I can probably get you time served and—" "Ms. Jenkins," Thorne said softly. Sophia stopped shuffling papers. She looked up. She saw the face. She froze. She blinked. She had just taken the bar exam 2 years ago. She had studied his opinions. She had cited his dissent in State versus Reynolds in her final thesis. Oh my God," she whispered. The blood drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. You're Justice Thorne," he finished for her. "Yes. I need to," she stammered. "Does the judge know?" "No one knows," Thorne said calmly. Officer Halloway refused to look at my identification. He preferred to rely on his intuition. "Halloway." Sophia breathed the name like a curse. Everyone knew Halloway. "Sir, I need to approach the bench. Immediately." "Please do," Thorne said. At the front of the room, behind the high wooden bench, sat Judge Arthur Miller. Miller was a tired man, looking forward to retirement in Florida. He was rubbing his temples, reading the next file. "Next case, State versus John Doe," Miller mumbled. "Officer Halloway is the arresting officer." Halloway, standing by the prosecution table, smirked and adjusted his belt. "Yes, Your Honor." Subject was belligerent, refused to ID, likely stole the vehicle. "Your Honor!" Sophia Jenkins' voice cracked as she practically ran to the podium. "May we approach?" "Now?" Judge Miller looked annoyed. "Counselor, can this not wait? We have a full docket." "No, Your Honor. It cannot wait. It really, really cannot wait." Her eyes were wide, frantic. Miller sighed. "Fine, approach. You too, Mr. Danton," he signaled the prosecutor. Halloway stayed back, looking bored. Sophia leaned over the bench, whispering fiercely, "Judge, you need to look at the defendant. Really look at him." Miller frowned, confused. He adjusted his glasses and peered over the rim at the defense table. Julian Thorne stood up. He buttoned his wrinkled suit jacket. He squared his shoulders. He looked directly at Judge Miller and gave a curt, professional nod. The color didn't just drain from Judge Miller's face. It seemed to leave the entire room. Miller's jaw literally dropped. He scrambled, his elbow knocking over his water cup, splashing water over his docket. "Holy!" Miller caught himself on the microphone. Miller looked at Halloway, then back at Thorne. The realization of what was happening hit him like a freight train. A beat cop had just arrested the highest-ranking judge in the state, the man who signed Judge Miller's paycheck, the man who wrote the rules of procedure they were currently operating under. "Bailiff!" Miller's voice shrieked, totally losing its composure. "Bailiff, unlock the defendant, now! Get those handcuffs off him immediately!" Halloway's smirk vanished. "Your Honor, he's a flight risk. We haven't ID'd—" "Shut your mouth, Officer Halloway!" Miller roared, his face turning purple. The entire courtroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. "You stand there and you do not speak another word, unless you want to be held in contempt so deep you'll never see sunlight again." The bailiff, looking terrified, fumbled with the keys and unlocked Thorne's wrists. Thorne rubbed his wrists, grimacing slightly at the bruising. "Your Honor," Thorne spoke. His voice projected to the back of the room without a microphone. It was rich, commanding, and dangerous. "I apologize for the disruption to your docket." "Justice Thorne," Miller stammered, standing up, a sign of respect usually reserved for when the jury enters. I had no idea. I am mortified." At the name Justice Thorne, the prosecutor, Mark Danton, dropped his pen. He whipped his head around to stare at Halloway. Halloway looked confused. The name meant nothing to him. He didn't follow politics. He didn't read case law. "Justice?" Halloway asked, confused. "He's a judge?" Thorne turned slowly to face Halloway. The movement was predatory. "I am not just a judge, Officer Halloway," Thorne said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. "I am the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. The car you accused me of stealing was a gift from my late wife. The marijuana you smelled was my cologne, and the resistance you cited was my attempt to prevent you from violating my Fourth Amendment rights." Thorne took a step toward the rail. "You have arrested the man who oversees the review board for police misconduct in this state. You have falsified a police report, and you have assaulted a senior officer of the court." Halloway felt his knees turn to water. The room was spinning. "Mr. Danton," Thorne turned to the prosecutor, "I assume the state moves to dismiss?" "Yes," Danton squeaked. "Yes, Your Honor. Dismissed, with prejudice, immediately." "Good," Thorne said. "However, I would ask that the record remain open." "For what purpose, Justice?" Miller asked, trembling. "Because," Thorne said, pointing a long, steady finger at Brando Halloway, "I am filing a cross-complaint against Officer Halloway for deprivation of civil rights, false imprisonment, and assault. And I want him taken into custody. Right. Now." The silence in courtroom 4B didn't last. It was shattered by the heavy, hurried footsteps of Mike O'Connell, the senior representative for the Fraternal Order of Police. He burst through the double doors at the back of the courtroom, his suit jacket straining against a linebacker's build, his face flushed with the kind of urgent aggression that usually signaled a cover-up in progress. He had been alerted by a text message from the bailiff, a code red in the department vernacular. Halloway stopped a judge. "It's Thorne. Get here now." "Your Honor," O'Connell boomed, ignoring the bar separating the gallery from the well of the court. "I am intervening on behalf of Officer Halloway. You cannot order a summary arrest of a sworn officer based on a verbal motion during an arraignment." Judge Miller, still sweating and looking like he wanted to dissolve into his leather chair, looked from Thorne to O'Connell. He was caught between a rock and a nuclear warhead. "Mr. O'Connell," Judge Miller stammered, "Justice Thorne has made serious allegations of—" "Allegations are not charges!" O'Connell barked, stepping up next to Halloway. He placed a heavy hand on Halloway's shoulder, a physical totem of protection. Halloway, who had looked like a man facing the gallows moments ago, visibly straightened. The color returned to his cheeks. The Union was here. The blue wall had arrived. Thorne watched this tableau with eyes that were terrifyingly calm. He stood by the defense table, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had bitten into the skin. He didn't shout. He didn't interrupt. He let O'Connell dig the hole deeper. "This is a misunderstanding," O'Connell continued, smoothing his tone into something that sounded like reason, but felt like a threat. "Officer Halloway conducted a traffic stop. The driver was non-compliant. Identities were not verified. If there was a procedural error, it will be handled by internal affairs, not in a kangaroo court setting." Thorne finally moved. He walked slowly toward the prosecution table. The prosecutor, Danton, literally stepped back to give him space. "A procedural error," Thorne repeated. The words rolled off his tongue like gravel. "Mr. O'Connell, your client held me for 12 hours without checking my identification because he assumed a black man in a Jaguar could only be a criminal. That is not an error. That is a pathology." "With all due respect, Justice," O'Connell sneered, trying to sound respectful but failing. "Cop to cop, you know how it is on the street. It was dark. It was raining. You fit a profile." The room gasped. O'Connell realized too late what he had said. Thorne smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I fit a profile. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. I would like the court reporter to mark that statement. You have just admitted on the record that the stop was pretextual based on appearance, not behavior." O'Connell's jaw tightened. "I didn't say that. The record will speak for itself. Thorne turned to Judge Miller. "Your Honor, I am withdrawing my request for immediate arrest. Not because it isn't successful, but because I want to do this the right way. I want Officer Halloway to go home. I want him to think he has gotten away with it. I want him to believe that his badge is a shield that can deflect even the Supreme Court." Thorne picked up his wallet from the evidence bag the bailiff had sheepishly handed him. "But I am putting the city on notice. I am not just suing for damages. I am calling for a federal investigation into the practices of the 4th Precinct, and I am going to subpoena every dashcam video Officer Halloway has recorded in the last 5 years. Halloway flinched. For the first time, true fear flickered in his eyes. Not fear of jail, but fear of exposure. "You can't do that," Halloway blurted out. That's private police data." "It's public record, officer," Thorne said softly. "And I am the public." Thorne turned and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind him, leaving a silence that felt heavy, like the air before a tornado. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. Thorne walked to the curb where his Jaguar, which had been towed to the impound lot, and then frantically returned to the courthouse curb by a terrified police captain, was waiting. He got in. He didn't start the engine immediately. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Evelyn," he said, when the line connected. "Julian." The voice on the other end was sharp, smoky, and surprised. Evelyn Vance was the most vicious civil rights attorney in the state. She and Thorne had been rivals for decades. He was the establishment. She was the insurgent. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Finally ready to admit I was right about the mandatory sentencing guidelines?" "I need a lawyer, Evelyn," Thorne said. There was a pause. "You? The Chief Justice needs a lawyer? What did you do, Jaywalk?" "I was arrested last night. False imprisonment, racial profiling, assault." The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, a low whistle. "Who was the idiot?" Evelyn asked. "His name is Brando Halloway, and I don't just want to sue him, Evelyn. I want to dismantle him. I want to take the case apart, piece by piece, until everyone sees the rot underneath." "I'm clearing my schedule," Evelyn said. "I'll be at your house in an hour." Back in the courthouse, Halloway and O'Connell were walking toward the exit. Halloway felt shaky, but O'Connell was clapping him on the back. "Don't worry about it, Brando," O'Connell said. "He's just blowing smoke. He's a judge. He has to play nice with the department eventually. We'll delay the subpoena. We'll lose the footage. We'll bury him in paperwork until he drops it. You're suspended with pay pending investigation. Enjoy the vacation." Halloway grinned nervously. "Suspended with pay? So, paid vacation?" "Exactly," O'Connell winked. "Go home. Have a beer. Let me handle the politics." Halloway walked to his personal truck, a lifted Chevy Silverado. He felt a surge of relief. He had survived. The system worked. He was one of the good guys after all. He turned the key, blasting country music, and peeled out of the parking lot. He didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street. He didn't notice the journalist in the passenger seat, zooming in with a telephoto lens, capturing the smirk on Halloway's face as he left the courthouse. The headline was already written. The story broke at 6 p.m. The local news station, Channel 4, didn't just run a segment. They dedicated the entire hour to it. The headline in bold red letters at the bottom of the screen read, "Judgment Day. Chief Justice arrested in traffic stop." Officer Brando Halloway was sitting on his couch in his boxers, a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table, when his face appeared on the screen. The photo was from his academy graduation, looking young and proud, juxtaposed next to a mugshot. But the mugshot wasn't his. It was the John Doe booking photo of Justice Julian Thorne. The anchor, A grave-faced woman named Monica Perez was speaking. Sources tell Channel 4 that the arrest was predicated on a traffic stop where Officer Halloway claimed to smell marijuana, a claim that was later unsubstantiated. The suspect was none other than Chief Justice Julian Thorne, a man known for his strict interpretation of the law and his support of law enforcement. Halloway's phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it began to vibrate continuously, a solid block of noise. Texts from friends, cops, family. "Dude, is this true? You arrested Thorne? You are so screwed." Halloway threw the phone across the room. "It's all lies," he screamed at the TV. "I did my job." But the real blow came the next morning. Evelyn Vance didn't wait for the slow wheels of bureaucracy. She filed a federal lawsuit the moment the courts opened, and she attached a motion for immediate preservation of evidence. She stood on the steps of the Supreme Court building, cameras flashing around her like lightning. She looked fierce in a crimson suit. "We are not asking for special treatment because my client is a judge," Evelyn told the press. "We are asking for the same treatment that every citizen deserves and rarely gets. We have requested the dashcam footage. The police department has informed us that the file is corrupted." How convenient. She leaned into the microphones. But here is the thing about modern technology. Officer Halloway's cruiser is a 2023 model. It uploads directly to the cloud, and we have a whistleblower. At the precinct, Chief Marcus Sterling was pacing his office. He was a political animal, a man who survived by balancing the union against the mayor. But this scale had just broken. "What do you mean, we can't delete it?" Sterling screamed at the IT technician. "It's a third-party server, Chief," the tech guy said, trembling. "Axon Enterprise manages the cloud storage. Once it uploads, it's read-only. Defense Counsel already has a subpoena served to Amazon Web Services. They have the video." Chief Sterling slumped in his chair. "O'Connell isn't going to like this." "O'Connell can't fix this," the tech guy said quietly. "I saw the video, Chief. It's bad." The video leaked online 2 days later. It was worse than bad. It was viral. The footage showed the rain-slicked street. It showed the beautiful Jaguar. It showed Thorne's calm, polite demeanor. And it showed Halloway, aggressive, rude, escalating the situation within seconds. "I didn't ask for a speech, pal. I asked for your papers. And I smell marijuana." The internet exploded. The comment sections were a war zone, but the tide was overwhelmingly against Halloway. Lip readers analyzed Halloway's muttering. Lawyers broke down the Fourth Amendment violations frame by frame on TikTok. But the real twist lay in what Evelyn Vance found in the discovery phase of the lawsuit. Because Thorne was a judge, he knew exactly what to ask for. He didn't just ask for his own arrest record. He asked for Halloway's asset forfeiture logs. They sat in Thorne's mahogany-paneled library. Thorne, Evelyn, and a forensic accountant named Sophia. "Look at this," Sophia said, sliding a spreadsheet across the table. "Halloway has a pattern. He patrols the affluent borders of Bellevue and Mercer Island. But he doesn't pull over the minivans. He pulls over high-end luxury cars driven by minorities or young people. Profiling," Thorne nodded. "We knew that." "No, it's not just profiling," Sophia said, tapping the paper. "It's robbery. In the last 3 years, Halloway has seized over $400,000 in cash and jewelry during traffic stops under civil asset forfeiture laws. He claims he suspects drug trafficking, seizes the assets, but never files criminal charges. The people he robs are usually too embarrassed or too scared to fight for the money back. They just cut their losses." Thorne's eyes went cold. Civil asset forfeiture was a controversial law that allowed police to take property they suspected was involved in a crime. It was meant to cripple cartels. Halloway was using it to rob rich tourists and businessmen. He's a highwayman, Thorne whispered. He's a bandit with a badge. And here is the kicker, Evelyn said, a dark smile playing on her lips. 6 months ago, he stopped a young tech entrepreneur named David Kim, seized $15,000 cash Kim was taking to buy a used server. Kim tried to file a complaint. The complaint disappeared. Who made it disappear? Thorne asked. The signature on the dismissal is illegible, Evelyn said. But the union rep on the file. Mike O'Connell. Thorne stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the city he had sworn to serve. This isn't just about my arrest anymore, Evelyn. Halloway is a symptom. The whole precinct is infected. So what do we do? Evelyn asked. Settlement offer came in this morning. The city is offering $2 million to make this go away. They want you to sign an NDA. Thorne turned around. $2 million. Tax-free, Evelyn said. Easy money. Tell them, Thorne said, his voice hard as iron, that I don't want their money. I want the trial. I want Halloway on the stand. And I want the files on Mike O'Connell unsealed. That's war, Julian, Evelyn warned. If you go after the union, they will come for you. They'll dig up your past. They'll go after your late wife's estate. They will try to destroy your reputation. Let them try, Thorne said. I am the law. Meanwhile, in a suburban house with a manicured lawn, Brando Halloway was drinking his 4th beer of the afternoon. The blinds were drawn. Reporters were camped on his lawn. His wife, Brenda, walked into the living room, holding a crying baby. Brando, my sister called, she said, her voice trembling. She said she saw a video of you. She said you called that man a boy. It's edited, Halloway slurred. It's a deep fake. The media is lying. Brando, the bank called, Brenda continued, tears spilling over. They froze our joint account. Something about a federal investigation into unexplained deposits? Halloway dropped his beer. The bottle shattered on the floor, foaming over the carpet. Unexplained deposits? He whispered. He scrambled for his phone to call O'Connell. It went straight to voicemail. The subscriber you are trying to reach is not available. Halloway stared at the phone. The blue wall was cracking, and he was standing right under the falling rubble. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle was a fortress of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the old brick municipal building where Halloway usually operated. This wasn't traffic court. This was the big leagues. The courtroom was packed. Law students, civil rights activists, and reporters filled every inch of the gallery. In the front row sat Justice Julian Thorne, looking not like a victim, but like a predator waiting for the trap to spring. He wore a navy suit, his face unreadable. Officer Brando Halloway sat at the defense table. He looked smaller than usual. The swagger was gone, replaced by a cheap suit that didn't fit right, and a nervous tick in his left eye. His lawyer was a union-appointed shark named Richard Sterling, no relation to the chief, but just as slippery. Sterling had tried to paint Halloway as a hero in his opening statement. A dedicated officer working a dangerous beat, he had called him. A man who made a split-second decision in the rain. But now, it was Evelyn Vance's turn. She didn't pace. She didn't shout. She stood behind the podium, flipping through a binder of financial records with agonizing slowness. Officer Halloway, Evelyn began, not looking up. You stated that you pulled over Justice Thorne because of a busted tail light, is that correct? Yes, Halloway said, his voice tight, and the smell of marijuana. The dashcam footage shows both tail lights were functional, Evelyn said, glancing up. And the toxicology report on the car, yes, we swabbed the leather, showed zero trace of narcotics. Are you saying the machine is lying? I'm saying I smelled it, Halloway insisted, sticking to the script O'Connell had given him. Maybe it was from a car passing by. It was a chaotic environment. Chaotic, Evelyn repeated. A deserted street at midnight on a Tuesday. Right. She flipped a page. Let's talk about chaos, officer. Let's talk about the chaos you seem to find in the bank accounts of the people you pull over. Do you recognize this document? She projected an image onto the screens. It was a scan of a handwritten logbook. Halloway paled. That's my patrol log. It is. We obtained it through discovery after the judge threatened to hold your chief in contempt. Now, look at the entry for November 12th of last year. You pulled over a Mr. Samuel Higgins, tourist from Canada, driving a Mercedes. Halloway swallowed hard. I recall the stop. You seized $4,500 in cash from Mr. Higgins. You claimed it was suspected proceeds of illegal gambling. Did you arrest Mr. Higgins? No, Halloway said. We released him with a warning. And the money? Evelyn asked. Did you log the money into the precinct evidence locker? Yes, Halloway lied. Standard procedure. That's strange, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Because we subpoenaed the evidence locker logs. There is no entry for $4,500 on November 12th. However, she clicked a remote. A new document appeared, a bank statement. On November 13th, the very next morning, a cash deposit of $4,500 was made into a frantic account at Wells Fargo. The account is in the name of Brenda Halloway. That is your wife, is it not? The courtroom gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Sterling, the union lawyer, jumped up. Objection, relevance. This is a trial about the arrest of Justice Thorne, not a financial audit. It goes to pattern and practice, Your Honor, Evelyn shot back. It goes to credibility. This officer uses his badge to rob citizens. He pulled over Justice Thorne not to enforce the law, but to see what was in his wallet. The federal judge, a stern woman named Judge Kincaid, peered over her glasses. Overruled. The witness will answer. Halloway felt the sweat trickling down his back. He looked at the jury. They looked back with disgust. He looked at O'Connell, who was sitting in the back row. O'Connell wasn't looking at him. He was typing on his phone. My wife won at bingo, Halloway stammered. It was a coincidence. Bingo, Evelyn deadpanned. And did she win $15,000 the week you stopped David Kim? Did she win a Rolex watch the week you stopped a rap promoter named Big T? I take the fifth, Halloway blurted out. You can't take the fifth in a civil trial regarding your employment duties without consequence, officer. Evelyn smiled. But the jury can certainly draw an inference from your silence. Evelyn closed the binder with a snap. No more questions. As Halloway stumbled off the stand, he felt like he had gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight. He collapsed into his chair. We need a recess, he hissed to Sterling. Fix this. Get O'Connell to fix this. Sterling looked at him with cold, shark-like eyes. Sit down and shut up, Brando. You're making a scene. That was when Halloway noticed something. The courtroom doors opened. 2 men in dark suits entered. They weren't lawyers. They weren't reporters. They were FBI. And they were blocking the exit. The recess was called for lunch. Halloway rushed to the corridor, desperate to find Mike O'Connell. He found the union rep standing near the vending machines, talking to Chief Sterling. Mike! Halloway shouted, ignoring the stares of passers-by. Mike, they have the bank records. How did they get the bank records? You said the union shielded those? O'Connell turned slowly. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He looked like a man looking at a dog that had to be put down. Keep your voice down, Brando, O'Connell said. Don't tell me to keep it down. I'm dying in there. You told me to stick to the script. You told me the smell of weed excuse works every time. It does work, O'Connell said calmly, when you use it on a kid from the projects. Not when you use it on the Chief Justice, you moron. You have to help me, Halloway pleaded, grabbing O'Connell's sleeve. Call the mayor, call the DA, make this go away. O'Connell brushed Halloway's hand off his jacket, as if it were dirt. Brando, O'Connell said, his voice devoid of empathy. The DA isn't taking my calls. The mayor is issuing a press release in 20 minutes condemning rogue officers. You're toxic. Rogue, Halloway stepped back. I followed your playbook. You taught me how to seize the cash. You took a cut of the asset forfeiture fund for the Union BBQ every year. O'Connell's eyes flashed with danger. He stepped in close, invading Halloway's space. You say that again, and I'll sue you for defamation myself. There is no cut. There is no playbook. If you were corrupt, Brando, that's on you. The Fraternal Order of Police protects good officers, not criminals. Halloway felt the floor drop out from under him. You're cutting me loose. We're not just cutting you loose, Chief Sterling chimed in, speaking for the first time. I'm firing you, effective immediately, badge and gun. Now. You can't do that, Halloway screamed. Due process. You just admitted to felonies on the stand, Brando, Chief Sterling said. You're done. And frankly, it's better you than the whole department. Halloway stood there, stunned, as the chief held out his hand. Halloway reached into his jacket, pulled out his badge, the shield he had hidden behind for 6 years, and dropped it into the chief's palm. It felt heavy. You guys are snakes, Halloway spat. I'll take you all down with me. No, you won't, O'Connell said, checking his watch, because nobody believes a dirty cop, especially not when the FBI is waiting for you. O'Connell nodded toward the end of the hall. The 2 agents from the courtroom were walking towards them. Halloway panicked. He looked for an exit, but there was nowhere to go. The lead agent, a tall man with a shaved head, stopped in front of him. Brando Halloway? Yeah? Special Agent Miller, FBI Public Corruption Unit. You're under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, wire fraud, and money laundering. You can't arrest me here. I'm in the middle of a trial. Actually, the agent smiled thinly. Justice Thorne agreed to a recess specifically so we could take you into custody. He wanted to make sure you got the full experience. Halloway was spun around. His face was pressed against the vending machine, the cold metal pressed against his cheek. Click. The handcuffs went on. But these weren't the loose, comfortable cuffs he used on his buddies during training. These were tight, professional, final. As they marched him down the hallway, past the reporters who were now capturing every second of his humiliation, Halloway saw him. Julian Thorne was standing by the elevator, sipping a coffee. He looked immaculate. He watched Halloway being dragged away. Their eyes met. Halloway wanted to scream, to curse, to spit. But he couldn't. The weight of Thorne's gaze crushed him. Thorne didn't smile. He just nodded once, slowly. A judge acknowledging the execution of a sentence. Halloway was shoved into the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off the view of the man he had underestimated. But the story wasn't over. Halloway was in a cell, but the system that created him was still out there. And Julian Thorne wasn't satisfied with just one scalp. The wheels of justice grind slow. But when they are greased by the righteous fury of the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, they grind exceedingly fine. 6 months had passed since the rain-slicked night on Bellevue Way. The seasons had changed, turning Seattle from a gray, weeping city into a burst of early summer green. But for Brando Halloway, time had stopped. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle was a fortress of limestone and glass, a stark contrast to the grimy municipal precinct where Halloway had once held court like a petty king. Today, Courtroom 9 was standing room only. The gallery was a sea of faces: civil rights activists, legal scholars, reporters with their laptops open, and, most damning of all, the victims. There were dozens of them. The drug dealers Halloway had shaken down, the tourists whose vacation cash had bought Halloway's boat, the young men whose lives had been derailed by false, resisting arrest charges. They sat in the back rows, a silent Greek chorus waiting for the final act. Noticeably absent was the blue wall. There was no row of uniformed officers sitting behind the defense table to show solidarity. The Fraternal Order of Police had abandoned Halloway the moment the FBI indictment dropped. Mike O'Connell, the union rep who had once promised Halloway he was untouchable, was currently negotiating his own plea deal in a separate room 3 floors down. Chief Sterling had taken a sudden, forced retirement to avoid prosecution. Halloway stood alone. He looked unrecognizable. The 6 months in federal protective custody, because a dirty cop has a life expectancy of minutes in the general population, had hollowed him out. He had lost 30 pounds. His skin was the color of old parchment, pasty and grey from a lack of sunlight. The arrogance that had defined his career, the swagger in his walk, the sneer on his lip, it was all gone. He wore a bright orange federal jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame, shackled at the waist and ankles. He gripped the podium with trembling hands, his knuckles white. Federal Judge Eleanor Kincaid sat high above him on the bench. She was a legend in the circuit, known as the Iron Lady for her refusal to accept plea bargains that were too lenient. She peered over her spectacles, her gaze dissecting Halloway like a specimen on a slide. "Mr. Halloway," Judge Kincaid's voice boomed, amplified by the microphone, filling the cavernous room. "You have pleaded guilty to 3 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 2 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of money laundering. The pre-sentencing report is extensive." She tapped a thick stack of papers, the sum total of Halloway's corruption. "Before I pass sentence, is there anything you wish to say?" Halloway looked back at the gallery. He was searching for his wife, Brenda. He wanted to see her face, to find some shred of sympathy. But Brenda wasn't there. She had filed for divorce 3 days after the bank accounts were frozen. She had taken the children and moved to Idaho, changing her last name to distance herself from the shame. Halloway had no one. He turned back to the microphone, licking his dry lips. "Your Honor," Halloway rasped, his voice cracking. I just want to say that I was a soldier. I was fighting a war on the streets. I did what I was told was necessary to keep this city safe. I fell into a culture that encouraged certain shortcuts. I am not a bad man. I made mistakes. It was the wrong thing to say." A murmur of anger rippled through the victims in the back. Halloway was still making excuses. He was still the hero in his own twisted narrative. "Mistakes?" The word cut through the room like a whip. It came from the front row. Justice Julian Thorne stood up. He did not need permission. He did not need a microphone. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Halloway's former annual salary. He looked every inch the titan of the law he was. He walked to the center of the well, standing between Halloway and the judge. "Your Honor, if I may," Thorne said. "Proceed, Justice Thorne." Judge Kincaid nodded deferentially. Thorne turned slowly to face Halloway. The look in Thorne's eyes wasn't anger. It was something far worse. Absolute, crushing disappointment. "You call them mistakes, Mr. Halloway," Thorne began, his deep baritone voice resonating off the wood-paneled walls. "A mistake is forgetting to signal a turn. A mistake is a typo on a report. What you did was not a mistake. It was a lifestyle. It was predation." Thorne took a step closer. Halloway flinched, the chains around his waist jingling. You did not fight a war, Thorne continued, his voice rising with controlled intensity. You ran a toll booth. You used the badge, a symbol of protection, as a weapon to rob the very people you swore to serve. You targeted the vulnerable because you thought they were weak. You targeted me because you thought I was just another statistic you could exploit. Thorne pointed a long, steady finger at the defendant. You stole money, yes, but that is the least of your crimes. You stole faith. You stole the community's trust in the law. Every time you pinned that badge on your chest, you lied to this city. You are not a soldier, Mr. Halloway. You are a bandit. And today, the road ends. Thorne sat down. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Halloway looked down at his shackles, weeping silently. The tears weren't for his victims, they were for himself. Judge Kincaid adjusted her robes. She picked up a pen. Mr. Halloway, your lack of genuine remorse is noted, she said, her voice cold as liquid nitrogen. You blame the culture. You blame the war. You take no ownership. The court finds you to be a danger to the public trust. She leaned forward. The federal guidelines suggest a sentence of 8 to 10 years. However, given the egregious nature of your crimes, the abuse of authority, and the sheer volume of victims, I am departing upward from the guidelines. Halloway's head snapped up. His lawyer, a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, sighed. Brando Halloway, Judge Kincaid declared, I sentence you to 15 years in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. There is no parole in the federal system. You will serve 85% of that time, mandatory. Furthermore, I am ordering full restitution of $450,000 to be paid to the Victims' Fund. Your police pension is hereby forfeited and seized to pay this debt. 15 years? Halloway screamed, his legs giving out. My pension! That's everything. I'll be destitute. You should have thought of that before you turned your cruiser into a cash register, Judge Kincaid said, bringing the gavel down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. We are adjourned. 2 U.S. Marshals moved in immediately. They didn't handle him gently. They grabbed Halloway by the arms and hauled him up. Move it, inmate, one of them barked. As he was dragged toward the side door, kicking and sobbing, Halloway locked eyes with Thorne one last time. Thorne didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply watched, impassive, witnessing the final rotation of the wheel of karma. Halloway disappeared through the steel door, his screams cut off as it slammed shut. Outside the courthouse, the air was sweet and fresh. The media circus was waiting, cameras flashing, as Thorne emerged alongside his attorney, Evelyn Vance. Justice Thorne, how do you feel? A reporter shouted. Thorne paused on the steps. He looked out at the city skyline. I feel like the system works, Thorne said into the microphones. It just needs a little encouragement sometimes. He walked past the cameras toward the curb. The valet was waiting. And there it was, the 1967 Jaguar E-Type, the car that had started it all. It gleamed British racing green in the sunlight, a masterpiece of machinery that Halloway had tried to steal under the guise of the law. Thorne tipped the valet, a young black man with dreadlocks. Thank you, son, Thorne said. Nice car, Judge. The kid smiled. Be safe out there. I intend to, Thorne replied. He slid into the driver's seat. The leather smelled of mahogany and victory. He started the engine, the Jaguar purring like a large cat waking from a nap. As he pulled away from the curb, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn. Update. The FBI just raided O'Connell's home. They found the ledger under the floorboards. It's over, Julian. We got them all. Thorne allowed himself a rare, genuine smile. He adjusted his rear-view mirror. In the reflection, the courthouse shrank into the distance, taking the ruins of Brando Halloway's life with it. The storm was over. The streets were clean. and the judge was finally going home. And that is the story of how Officer Brando Halloway learned the hardest lesson of his life. He thought power came from the badge on his chest and the gun on his hip. He thought he could judge a man by the color of his skin and the car he drove. But true power isn't about intimidation or fear. True power is knowledge, dignity, and the unyielding weight of the truth. Halloway lost everything, his career, his family, and his freedom, because he forgot who he was supposed to serve. It's a brutal reminder that no one is above the law, and sometimes the person you try to bully is the very person holding the gavel. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm share this karma with others. What do you think? Did Halloway deserve 15 years, or should the punishment have gone even higher up the chain to the chief? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories about corrupt officials getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. You do not want to miss the next episode. Until next time, stay safe, know your rights, and never judge a book by its cover.